So this past weekend we had the ADCC World Championships, some really interesting matches, and it was also interesting to see how the event went up head to head against CJI. So I'm going to do a quick recap on the final matches. Those were the most interesting in my opinion, and also some of my thoughts on the event as a whole. So the big elephant in the room was obviously how would ADCC stack up against CJI this year. Their back seemed against the wall coming into this. They dealt with a lot of heat, a lot of pressure from both the fans and other competitors. A lot of their mistakes from the past were really brought to the forefront. So I feel like there was some extra pressure on them this year. Thankfully, compared to the last ADCC, it seemed like they dialed it back slightly with the production things and seemed to get the more important things in, and they took away some of the less important things. So at the last ADCC, for example, I remember thinking at the time, this is like an event that was organized by a load of high school students doing their prom or something like that. They thought of the fireworks, they thought of the Pride lady announcing everyone's names, they had Bruce Buffer, they had loads of people banging the drums, but then they forgot simple things like start the event on time, have the commentary good, have the video streams good, have like proper seating for the fans after paying so much for the tickets. So it wasn't perfect this time around. There was still some issues with the stream, still some issues with the commentary, but it seemed like on a whole the event was much more streamlined, much easier to watch, and I heard that the fans that were at it actually had a pretty good experience, especially compared to the last edition 2 years ago. The biggest problem that ADCC had this year was the fact that it went up against CJI. So CJI was the next cool thing. It had all the modern rules, the MMA rounds, and they really nailed the spectacle over there. ADCC was stuck still with the old format, and I feel like, especially when you compared the two of them, it was obvious that the rules and the format and the venue was much more spectator friendly at CJI. I don't want to go too much into the negatives because it was mostly positive again for both events this week, but you really notice people gaming the rules more in ADCC. So a lot of stalling, a lot of waiting for points, a lot of tricking around with the guard pulling rules, like letting yourself get taken down in the finals, things like that. You can't blame the competitors again. It's based on the rules and the different formats that they have there. The competitors are going to do what it takes to win. But I definitely noticed that the rules didn't incentivize exciting matches in ADCC as much as they did in CJI. The other negative was people flying off the mats again, rolling out of bounds. It just doesn't make as much sense, especially seeing it the other way around. Okay, maybe that's the best they have, but acting like it's cool for the competitors and it's cool for the fans, I think it's a bit disingenuous. There was a bit of talk when some people would fly out of bounds, oh, I'd rather see that than see the ramps at CJI. And let's be honest, that's total bullshit. It's dangerous for the competitors and it gets reset anyway. And then it's a weird position. There's always one person that's fighting harder and another person who's like, when are we going to stop? I'm just after rolling over someone's drink and now I'm touching someone's leg, or I'm after flying into a table. So it's just a bit messy and it doesn't look as good or professional as we would like. The last negative I'll go into before I go into the many positives, because again, it was a really exciting event and they did improve a lot compared to the last edition, but this is the commentary. And for some reason, I don't know what it is. A lot of the commentators that I normally actually quite like, there's some of them that I don't like very much, but a lot of them I do quite like. I feel like they have good insights, they're good speakers, they don't talk about themselves too much, because again, I can listen to an interview with them if I want to hear about the commentators themselves. I'd rather hear some interesting insights into the match that I'm trying to watch. But for some reason this year, they must have all been briefed on every 2 seconds you have to talk up ADCC as much as you can. But the problem is when you constantly hear how this is the best, this is the best, this is the best, and all these different reasons, it just came across as very disingenuous. Anytime there was a slight break in the action, and things were getting a little bit slow, to be honest, that's when a commentator should come in, a little anecdote, some little interesting thing. That's when you interject the little facts that you have written out on your sheet. But instead, all we heard was how this is the most exciting competition in the world during quite boring parts of matches. And it just took you out of the experience. Like when I'm watching a competition, I want to be focused on who's winning. I want to be paying attention to every little detail, every little grip. But for some reason, all it did was take me out of it and basically remind me how much they were competing against CJI and the fact that in that battle they were losing. So I think they would have actually had much more success if they tried to just completely forget about it, do their own thing, and don't worry about CJI. When you directly compare yourself to the competitor, then you bring it to a head-to-head fight, and clearly they were not going to win that fight this weekend, despite still having a good event. So putting those topics aside, let's get into the finals for the men's division, starting with the heaviest and then working our way down to 66 kilo division, which I actually thought was probably the most exciting match of the whole competition. So in the plus 99 division, some of the big heavy hitters were obviously missing, competing over at CGI this weekend, but it was still quite a solid bracket, and I was really looking forward to seeing how Felipe Pena would fare in this competition, especially combined with the fact that we knew he had a quite random but still interesting super fight against Gordon Ryan at the end of the first day. I was hoping he would be well trained, trying to get a nice win over Gordon Ryan, especially since the rule set finally suited him a bit more than maybe the previous submission only ones. So I was really happy to see that he actually had put a lot of good training time in leading up to this. His fitness looked good, he looked very focused, and you could see his movements were quite sharp. He had a game plan and he was going towards it. In this final, he got off to a rough start. Luke was able to do some nice hand fighting on the feet, start to get Pena down, get behind him, and he had a good look at a back take. But again, Pena's experience, he's competed in so many ADCCs, so many ADCC finals, and he's been training obviously at the top level with a lot of different high-level training partners for the last 10 years. So you really saw his experience as Luke was going for the back take. Pena was able to defend, reset to the feet, and Luke being in his first ADCC final, you could see a bit of the, oh shit, that was one of my good chances to be champion gone. It's not that he was overly tired or anything like that, but it can play some tricks on your mind when you get to a close submission or a close match-winning move, especially very early on. And then the match starts to prove to be a bit trickier than you expected. There's nothing more tiring than being in the middle of a match and thinking, oh, this is a bit harder than I was expecting or hoping. Okay, and then Felipe Pena even upped his level after that. It was still in the no points period, and it seemed like he used not too much energy escaping. Almost at the points then, he got in on a good double leg, I think surprised Luke, got him down, and you really saw Pena's movement helped him out. Luke moves very well, he's a very big man, but for some reason Pena has always looked like a very athletic specimen, even though when you look at him, he doesn't look the strongest or the most flexible or even like the most ripped or anything like that. But when you see him move, he's just a natural athlete. And combine that with how big he naturally is, he was able to put a lot of pressure on Luke, get to his back and get the choke. It seemed like Luke tapped quite early, but again, that's just another case of he knew he was done at that stage. And Pena does have good finishing mechanics, as you saw probably 6 or 7 years ago at this stage when he submitted Gordon Ryan and rear naked choked him from the back as well. So that was really impressive from Pena, who had quite a good performance the day before against Gordon Ryan, was able to stifle a lot of Gordon's attacks. And to be honest, that match felt more like a draw than anything. Gordon got 2 points, but they were slightly dubious during a wrestling scramble where Pena actually initiated it. So again, he lost a very close match the day before against Gordon Ryan. And congrats to Pena, he looked much improved for this competition. He looked very sharp, and getting a submission in the finals over a tough opponent like Luke, that's a really big statement, especially after the last couple of difficult years that he's had on the mats. Moving on then to the under 99 kilo division. Again, we had a lot of the hot favourites drop out for this one, but the biggest favourite, who seems to always turn it up, as everyone says, for ADCC, was Kaynan Duarte. And again, he did not disappoint at this event. It is always funny how unbeatable Kaynan looks at ADCC sometimes, and then outside of that, especially in different super fights that he takes, you see that he's as beatable as anyone on the professional roster. So obviously for ADCC, he's doing a serious cycle, number one, let's make no mistake about it, most competitors are, but also he's probably putting in that focused 10 weeks training camp. You'll hear from different people that Kaynan, again, because he's so talented, I would say, he doesn't always train flat out all year round. Now, I could be wrong, but this is just something that I've heard from many different high-level competitors, that he goes through phases of hard training, and ADCC is clearly a time when he's putting in that 2-3 months consistent with consistently good training partners, and he's very sharp. And you could see that in this competition. Compared to some of his last super fights where he lost most of them, to be honest. He's losing against Marigali, he lost against Luke Griffith, he lost against Tim Spriggs. I know this was a few years ago, but these are all kind of upsets, and you would heavily favour Kaynan over all those competitors in ADCC when he is sharp. And you could see that sharpness from minute one of the division. He even surprised some of his opponents pulling guard straight into wrestle-ups, leg attacks. He just looked very focused, and he wasn't overusing his energy. Some of his opponents were a bit taller than him, and he struggled with that in the past against the likes of Luke and Marigali, where he ate a lot of collar ties until he got tired and then he got out wrestled. So he was saving his energy in this one, trying not to tire himself out, getting into those hand fighting battles on the feet. And then once he got on top, he just looked like a machine. He would just put the pressure. No one could budge his weight off them. And he did a lot of the similar type of passing. He would get to the headquarters, heavy pressure, almost Gordon-esque style, with his head positioning over the shoulders, just so the person is carrying his weight the whole time. And again, he was able to get to the back in a lot of his matches. He also got some good guillotine choke finishes. And you can see when he uses his guillotine choke, there's some nice details that he uses that'll be worth watching. Now, again, he's obviously incredibly strong, which helps. But for a big man, sometimes they actually find it hard to get the grips fully under the chin. And you can see something that he does well. He starts with his elbow flared open, gets his grip, but then you can really see he draws his elbow back towards his body, and he's using that to pull the chin away from his opponent's chest, and that can let him get the blade under the neck. And again, some of these guillotines that he was finishing at the event were from kind of disadvantageous positions that you really wouldn't expect another black belt to be tapping to. But obviously his chin strap and his control is just so good that he's able to get the finish against these other high-level opponents. So take an extra look at some of Kaynan's matches, and especially his guillotine. Even though it might look wrong on the surface, really pay attention to how he's gripping and his elbow placement with those grips, and you'll be able to pick up some nice details there that you can add into your own game. So again, talking about Kaynan aside, I know this is like a breakdown of just how Kaynan's tournament went, but his final match against Rafael Lovato was really no different than any of his other matches. Fair play to Lovato. He's one of the older competitors in the whole competition, and he took out some big names, beating Pixley after Pixley submitted Marigali before that. So Lovato still at the top of the game. He's been medaling at ADCC for the last 15 years. So he's had incredible longevity. Again, someone maybe to be studied. The sports medicine he's getting is obviously doing the trick, but it was still impressive to see him get such a deep run in the competition. Unfortunately, he came up against Kaynan in the final, who did basically the same thing that he's done to all his other opponents. He was cagey enough for the first few minutes, again, because the final is long and Kaynan knows he doesn't want to get tired. Hand fighting, feeling each other out, and then when he went for the blast double and got on top, that was all she wrote. It was the exact same type of pressure passing, getting to the back, getting the rear naked choke. It seemed fairly standard for Kaynan, who was again very sharp on the day. So congrats to both competitors. They had a great tournament, but especially Kaynan. It was nice to see him back on top. He also won the absolute division with a very similar style. So we'll see if Gordon Ryan sticks around in 2 years' time. I'm sure he'll be feeling very sharp for that as well, and he'll be able to give him a very competitive match. Up next then, we had the under 88 kilo final. Giancarlo Bodoni against Jay Rodriguez. So I was really impressed with J Rod this weekend, especially seeing his brother Nicky Rod win the $1 million in CJI, the breakdown of which you can check out on the channel as well if you haven't already. But it was really impressive to see J Rod fix some of the holes that we've seen in his game over the past few years. So he's always been a very game competitor, very scrambly, someone who seems to start the matches quite slow. You even see him against opponents who are a bit smaller than him, a bit less experienced. He's getting put in close submissions, especially in the beginning of the match. But his escapes are so good. He's able to escape, wear out his opponents, and then as the match goes on, impose his own game, usually get to good positions and finish himself. And he's proven to be quite a dangerous finisher from the back and with things like buggy chokes, etc. So this tournament, it was really good to see him a bit more disciplined than usual and very focused in his wrestling and his passing. Less crazy scrambles, but a lot more focused scrambles, I would say. His style fits perfectly in the rule set as well, where he can be a bit wilder in the first few minutes with the no points, and then he can dial it down, focus on his wrestling, his passing, which was much improved, and again, his back takes are always going to be high level. In the final, he was going up against Giancarlo Bodoni. Again, someone who, outside of ADCC, he's hot and cold, more hot than not, but he has been losing some unexpected matches over the last couple of years, especially being ADCC champion. Sometimes you expect the person is a bit invincible when they're clearly not. But again, he's someone who seems to really focus and dial in that training camp coming up to ADCC. Again, maybe the supplements have something to do with it, but if we're looking just at the technical side of it, he did seem to have a very solid game plan. We saw some great guard work from him again, and just very well-rounded. He's probably one of my favourite competitors to watch because every competition he does, I feel like he adds certain new elements to his game, sharpens others, and there's always something to learn from him. His back takes are some of the best in the business. I know from studying him, I found some great solutions to different problems that I have. Even if it's not a clear solution, you'll just see a different idea, where he opens up space to get in the hooks, how he positions his body. He's really sharp with that, and you can tell that it's something that he drills and practices a lot in the training room. I see them training a lot, practicing, starting on the feet, going to the ground, ending in the turtle position. So they're doing ADCC style sequences like this all the time. And again, you really saw it pay off here. A lot of his matches, he was playing guard, feeling out the opponent, waiting for his chance to wrestle up, hip heights to the headlock, or even attack some legs to try and either get the finish or get on top. And in this final between J-Rod and Giancarlo Bodoni, you saw a lot of those elements really go head to head. So there was some great wrestling exchanges, some great passing exchanges. J-Rod got very close to passing Bodoni's guard on a couple of occasions, and this is something I was really impressed with. Jay's always been very good at loose passing side to side, and he has a very good body lock pass as well, but it seemed like he was connecting the two and mixing the two a lot better in this competition. He would start out loose and he was getting into close body lock style positions, even sometimes without his hands connected, and he put real pressure on Bodoni. It seemed like throughout the match, Jay was actually getting better and better, and as I was watching it, I was expecting Jay to pull it out in the last few minutes. But actually we saw the opposite. We saw Bodoni just upped his level with a few minutes to go. He was really focused. When he would get back on the feet, you could see he was straight back into his hand fighting procedures and systems that he's clearly drilled a lot and is very focused on. You could see even with his stance and the way he was grip fighting, he had a plan and he knew exactly what to do. And as the match went on, I feel like him just having that extra bit of a plan and focus led to him getting Jay down, getting on top, getting on the back, and winning the match from there. So definitely a match worth checking out. One of the best matches of the day, in my opinion. One of the most intense finals, especially being B Team versus New Wave, the young up-and-comer against the previous ADCC champion. So there was a lot of great storylines, great battles, and this match didn't disappoint. It's definitely worth the watch, and there's a lot of technical takeaways to take from it as well. Following on from Bodoni getting his second ADCC gold, we then had the under 77 kilo division final between Vagner Rocha and Mica Galvao. Some people might be surprised that Vagner made it the whole way through to the final. He's either 41 or 42 years old. I can't remember exactly which, but I wasn't surprised seeing it. He's one of the biggest veterans in the sport. You can tell physically he's still quite robust, despite him having a few injuries that I think he's talked about in the past. But he's clearly very robust, very experienced, and still quite athletic, and more importantly than anything, hungry. You saw in all his matches, when the match got tough, when it got down to the last minute or two, he was the one who was digging deep. He was able to pull the things out of the bag, and it's just that experience and that grit and that real championship mentality that he has that we really got to see in this competition. Again, some people think that he's rougher than he actually is. While he competes rough in matches, if you have a look at a lot of his matches, it's very rare that anyone gets hurt training or competing with Vagner. He goes hard, but he goes very fair, and I feel like he really enjoys competing, and he enjoys jiu-jitsu as a fighting art, which again, I know it's a bit of a cliche. These days, some people complaining that jiu-jitsu is losing its roots, guard pullers, this and that. I don't mind any of that. I think of jiu-jitsu as a sport and for fighting, and I would like to be fairly effective in the two. And again, a lot of the time when you see people pulling guard, that's not to say they're not going to be effective in MMA or in a normal fight. That's just what their strategy is for the rules, so I wouldn't hold that against it. But again, Vagner is definitely someone who brings that MMA fighting spirit to jiu-jitsu, which is really nice to see. And he came up in the final against the division's hot favourite, Mica Galvao. Mica is someone who's been on a big hot streak this year, winning all the gi majors and now winning ADCC as well. But in this match, it was a lot closer, I think, than a lot of people expected. It reminded me a lot to Mica's match last ADCC against Dante Leon, which really went down to the wire, despite Mica having a lot of close, strong attacks and submission attempts in the first few minutes of the match. So it was the same thing here. Vagner started off, again, very solid in the wrestling, and it was quite clear from the beginning that Vagner actually had a bit of an edge in the traditional wrestling style. On the ground, Mica seemed slightly more dangerous, and he was very good in the scrambles. A lot of the battles in this match were between Vagner attempting traditional wrestling type takedowns, double leg, single leg, getting to the back body lock, and then as soon as they would hit the ground, Mica would go into jiu-jitsu scramble mode, and you really got to see his agility and his reflexes in some of these scrambles. In one of them, Vagner takes Mica down. It looks like he's about to score or at least get top position. And then Mica bounces up, starts to get on top, starts to get towards the back, and immediately puts Vagner in a fully locked rear naked choke. But again, Vagner's experience kicked in and he was able to just about escape that. So this is the way most of the match was going, to be honest. Vagner attempting some solid looking takedowns which looked like they were going to score, and Mica being able to somehow scramble out of them and threaten some legitimate submission attempts. Then in the points period, Mica was able to get on Vagner's back, get up 3 points, but eventually Vagner was able to survive and escape. He then got his own 2 points for a takedown. So going into the last 2 minutes of the match, Vagner was down 2-3, but again, them being standing, I really thought that Vagner was going to be able to pull it out of the bag. Neither person looked too tired, even though they obviously were, but their conditioning was really on point for this event. So with 2 minutes to go, again, I was thinking Vagner was going to be able to just about get on top, but instead Mica actually surprised Vagner with an ankle pick that I wasn't expecting myself. Vagner tried to jump out of it quickly, but he seemed to lose his balance, and Mica was able to follow up with the back body lock and a back take. And then with only a minute to go, he was able to sink in the rear naked choke and get the finish. So again, on paper, Mica was up a good few points and he got the submission with a minute to go. But I feel like that doesn't fully describe how close and exciting this match actually was. The young gun who's on a real hot streak this year against the old veteran who showed all his experience and skill and grit. And it really came down to that last 2 minutes. Without that ankle pick from Mica, we could have easily seen Vagner get his own takedown and come out victorious. So again, congrats to Vagner on a great tournament. It was really exciting to watch all his matches. He always puts on a great show. And then congrats to Mica. He finally got the job done. There was a lot of pressure on him as the hot favourite with so many people from his division away at CJI. And we got to see a nice, quite weird post-fight interview as well. But again, I won't talk about any of that. You can go watch it and decide for yourself. But quite strange, to be honest. And last but not least, we had my personal favourite match of the whole tournament, the 66 kilo final between Diego Pato and Diogo Reis. I don't normally like to say nice things about the people in my own division, but for once I'll break that rule because again, both of these guys were so impressive throughout the whole tournament and there was a lot of things to learn from both of them. It was really nice to see some adjustments they'd made since the last time they competed at Who's Number One just a few months ago, where Pato came out victorious and looked to have a big upper hand on Baby Shark, to be honest. But also, they competed at the last ADCC in the semi-final, where Baby Shark had the upper hand on Pato. So I'm sure this pattern will probably continue, and it only helps both competitors. As one levels up, the other has to level up, and so on. So it was really impressive to see how they both changed and adapted their strategies compared to recent matches they've had. Again, Pato was the hot favourite going into this competition. Most people I asked beforehand who they thought would win the 66 kilo division. Most of them said Diego Pato. He's had a great year, no gi and in the gi, submitting people like Dante Leon above his weight class in Who's Number One. Again, beating Baby Shark, looking quite convincing at Who's Number One. And also winning things like gi worlds and other gi competitions throughout the year as well. He's looked like his guard and his leg locks and also his passing has actually reached a whole new level. And he really has things dialed in since the last year or two when he's been training with the Mendez brothers. That's really showing. He's always been quite talented, but now he really has a game plan and his move selection has been really impressive throughout the win streak that he's had this year. Baby Shark then, earlier in the year, again, he's looked impressive since he won ADCC last time, but he has been hot and cold. He's won some matches that looked very close, looked harder than they should have been. He's had some maybe disappointing matches where he competed against Pato, didn't look himself, and he clearly had a few injuries, including one he got during the match. But since then, you could really tell that he'd renewed his focus for this ADCC. Especially, he's training with Mica Galvao, who is obviously putting ADCC as his number one priority for this year. It doesn't come around again for another couple of years, and it's basically the only tournament that Mica hasn't won until this event, obviously. So you could really feel that Baby Shark was a bit more focused for this one, dialed in. He even looked in better shape than usual. Again, everyone's on the supplements for ADCC, but his technique looked really impressive in this. He had more submissions than usual leading up to the final, some Darce chokes. You saw recently at Who's Number One, he had a nice anaconda choke. And in this final match, it was really the two best people from the division meeting against each other, which is nice to see. Normally in the 66 kilo division, just the way the games are and the way the competitors are and the styles, there's normally a lot of upsets. And I feel like in most years, if you repeated all the division, if you repeated most of the matches, there would be completely different results, completely different people in the final, and a completely different winner. But for some reason this year, it felt a bit more predictable, and it seemed like the better competitors won for the most part. There was some matches where the better competitor didn't win, which is always interesting, and there was some other matches with upsets as well. But these were really the two people that had a great tournament, and they both met in the final, so that was very exciting. The match started off, and you could really feel at the beginning that Pato probably had a slight edge in the confidence. Again, the last time they competed, Pato dominated quite significantly. So that was always going to be in the back of Baby Shark's mind. Even if he had fully renewed his confidence, that thought is always going to be in there somewhere. And Pato got off to a great start, tangling the legs, using it to come up on top, threatening some really strong footlocks like we saw in some of the other divisions or even his earlier matches, getting a nice submission in the semi-final with a classic turning style ankle lock. So he used some of these leg attacks to get up on top. He was able to pass Baby Shark's guard and get to the mount. And this is only halfway through the points period. He was already looking very impressive and it wasn't looking good for Baby Shark. But then, again, you see sometimes in ADCC, the no points can mess with your head as much as anything else. You've done all this work, you're sitting in the mount, it's still 2 minutes until the points even start. You're thinking, I've used all this energy. What happens if the other person escapes and I have to go back to the start? Again, it shouldn't be a big deal. If you can do it once, you can do it twice. But sometimes if the person does escape, which in this case did happen, you can start to go down a bit of a negative loop where you think, oh, I'm after wasting all that energy. I'm after doing such a great move and sequence and I got no reward for it. And that's exactly what happened. Baby Shark was able to escape, reset to the feet, get on top. And I feel like that was the boost that Baby Shark actually needed. He realized that no matter how bad it gets, he'll actually be fine. Pato was able to threaten the legs, get on top, get past, get mounted on him. And Baby Shark just escaped with a couple of minutes left in the no points period. He wasn't even losing and he felt all of Pato's total game. So you could really see he wasn't worried. He used less energy overall, I would say, in that sequence. And now he was back on top, putting his strategy. And this is where the match started to get really interesting. And one of the reasons I really enjoyed it was this back and forth nature. You saw Baby Shark did have a good plan for this match. At their last match at Who's Number One, he spent a lot of the match stuck in this middle passing range. So kind of like knee cut style range positions where he's not fully close, trying body lock, chest to chest, leg weave style passes, but he's also not fully out trying his loose passing style. So he was stuck in this middle range for a lot of that match, and Pato was able to just be very comfortable, control him, not be threatened too much, and then use some grips, especially this far side arm drag grip that he likes a lot, to start to get under the legs and threaten him. And after 10 minutes of that, Baby Shark was getting worn out, and again he got hurt in the end and Pato got the win. But in contrast this time, you could really tell Baby Shark's plan was to not get caught in that middle range. He was controlling the legs more and staying away from Pato's strong grips. Pato's known for having those strong grips, and you can see in his matches how strong his grips are, especially spending so many years being at the top of the gi game. So Baby Shark was able to stay at a long range where he's controlling Pato's legs, throwing him side to side and using the moments that Pato was recovering the guard to then skip the middle range and get straight into the close range. Okay, and even then, when Pato has to do a late stage recovery, Baby Shark was back out to the long range, moving side to side, being very disciplined, controlling the legs and not letting himself get pulled in and controlled. And after a few minutes of this, you could see Pato, he wasn't necessarily getting worn out, but Baby Shark was definitely having more and more success as the match went on. And again, this just makes you less tired, makes you more confident, and makes you double down on the strategy when you really see that it's starting to work. Then in the end, he was able to put a nice chain of loose passes together to get in close to a body lock, tripod style pass. As Pato was defending, he gave up the leg weave. So this is a great sequence to study. Again, you go from loose straight into tight, and then as the person is defending, you just surf their defenses to get into attacking position. And then from there, he was able to get to the head and arm choke. And Pato was obviously feeling a bit worn out at this stage. Baby Shark was going from strength to strength, and he was able to get the finish on the head and arm choke. Really impressive. We haven't seen Pato get submitted like that in a long time, especially at his own weight class. And it was one of the biggest moments in the competition, an end to the 66 kilo final. One of the most exciting matches, in my opinion, of the whole event, and making Baby Shark two-time ADCC champion. So that's it for the recap on the ADCC men's division finals. Again, a really great event. I'm happy to see that they improved a lot from the last ADCC, and hopefully leading into the next one in 2026, they'll be able to take on board more criticisms and learn from it. Maybe even learn a thing or two from CJI, which was also very impressive this week. So again, there was a lot of talk about this ADCC. Would it live up to the hype that it had? How would it stack up against CJI? Clearly CJI, if it was going head to head, in terms of being a spectator sport, I'd have to give the edge to CJI. Again, I might do a breakdown directly comparing the two, some of the things they did well, some of the things they did wrong. But just on a quick note, CGI was clearly the more spectator-friendly one. That doesn't mean that ADCC wasn't fantastic as well. The finals especially, they were some of my favourite matches from the whole event. Good intensity. And again, I like when the focus is just on one match. It's quite hard to follow when there's 3 mats going on. You get a bit lost chopping and changing. It's just not as focused, it's not as spectator friendly. But again, that's the nature of doing a competition with more competitors, more divisions. So I really enjoyed this year's ADCC, despite all the different controversies. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Did you prefer ADCC, CJI? What was your favourite match from this ADCC? Maybe your favourite submission, or just something you learned from the event overall. If you want to see more videos, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and I'll see everyone soon.